Trump launched his own cryptocurrency on his first day in the office. In just hours, Trump coin has minted countless millionaires, while the CEO of BlackRock has predicted that all financial assets will be tokenized in the future, following a $600 million purchase in Bitcoin, boosting its holdings to $58 billion. Meanwhile, in India, Mukesh Ambani has launched GeoCoin. With all of this happening, one thing is clear: the Web3 revolution is right here. We had a chat with Edward, the CEO of Katlas Technologies, a company redefining Web3 and distributed governance. Picture a world where your private data stays truly yours while still enabling breakthroughs in AI, healthcare, supply chain, and more. Stay tuned to know more about how Web3 might reshape tomorrow.
Hey Edward, thanks for coming here.
No problem.
So
Lovely to see you again.
what brings you to Hyderabad?
I was invited here by the International Startup Festival under
Okay.
Seshadri and Jay Chowdhury,
Okay.
after previously having connections 2 or 3 years ago.
Okay.
I came here for the first time at Bangalore last year for the 23,
Okay.
and I could see what they were trying to achieve. I could see it was interesting for me for selfish reasons as well as the profile of the International Startup Foundation.
Okay.
Because I have a small business, I think it can make a big impact. We can talk about that later. But the relationship or the potential relationship between the Startup Festival or the International Startup Foundation now and what Katlas provides as technology, I think could be very, very helpful. And of course, I've made friends from the last interaction here.
Okay.
So it's you feel like you're investing now in the community. I've seen the difference by being at Hyderabad. It's the technology piece excites me because it's what we do. I represent a core technology company.
Okay.
So even the last week, I've seen the growth and success of the International Startup Festival itself, but also meeting people for the second time. I think those bonds grow by more than twice, if you will.
Yes, yes.
Because they start to believe that you're sincere, and you start to learn, and they understand who you are, what you stand for, what you're trying to achieve, and in reality, that's when doors open. So there we are. It's
All right. That's a nice start.
Thank
you. So how do you know Jay Chaudhary and what brings you to ISF actually?
Say that again. Sorry.
How do you know Jay Chaudhary?
Well, really through his partner, Seshadri. So Seshadri Vangala is a co-founder of the Indian Startup Festival, which is now the International Startup Festival.
Okay.
I met Seshadri in Estonia. We were both winners, in fact, of International Trade Council awards. Katlas won an award for our technology for managing the cardiovascular patient health journey.
Okay.
Which sounds very grand, but it's a data management capability. It enables human health patients to manage their data in one place and be able to take that data, if you will, in their own suitcase or in their own wallet, and it enables them to take that data across countries and manage that data and communicate offline. It enables the pharmacies to be comfortable and confident that they're dealing with you and that they know your history. So all sorts of benefits from the healthcare journey. And Seshadri is running is a talent management company that was very interested in what we were trying to do. They won an award for their ideas. They were doing things differently, and he could see benefits from partnering, and we've been exploring those benefits since. I think it was 2022, where we met for the first time. He's very well connected, which is rather good.
Yes.
Of course, being an influencer and being mentored by Jay Chowdhury, he's got great access. And also, of course, he's built successful businesses himself. And all these things, as you guys know, and all wise men in commerce know, that you need people to work on your behalf. They have to be. Relationships matter, and I think Seshadri's got very good relationships. And if you don't mind me completing, to talk a little bit about, I think Jay Chowdhury Garu he's a rather magnificent man, and I've come to respect that more the second time. Now that I've seen the sincerity of his project, what he's trying to achieve.
Yes.
the influence he has amongst very substantial peers in health, in banking, in the space sector. And this all comes from his charisma. And it also is founded on his success. But I think the charisma is the key part of this and his natural personality. Not only his, but he's also wise man in so much as he understands the value of culture in India. He probably has a very good understanding of the culture of the British and other nations too, but he very much understands the culture of India. And therefore he's affiliated with, I think, politicians because of his career there. And I think he's affiliated with, the cultural traditions of the nation. And I could see at the end, the way he's brought a volunteer community together to serve the interests of the startup.
Yes.
He's brought excitement and engagement from what he calls unicorns, young people. He's given them an opportunity to show their talents and display their ambitions and seek mentorship and partnership. I think this is all very wonderful. And he's also bringing other people in who share that enthusiasm,
Yes.
which includes me. And to see how the young people were so bright-eyed, should we say, and I wouldn't say awestruck, I just think inspired. They felt that he clearly has a great relationship with the young people.
Yes.
And he clearly has a vision for solving some big problems in India. That's why.
For me, it's been like, it's the first time I'm coming to this city, Hyderabad. And in the last 2 days, I've heard a lot about him and I got to connect him, got the opportunity to connect with him in person. And within like 20 minutes of conversation, he shared me a lot of insights on the Andhra Pradesh ecosystem, is the state I am from.
Good.
So this is like Telangana, this is a different state. So he helped me connect with a lot of people who would help me with my ventures and my ideas, and we're not just talking for profit for business, but we're also talking non-profit.
Yes.
About promoting volunteering activities and things like that from the city of Visakhapatnam, which we're from. So yes, I actually agree with a lot of things you said on. So
well, I'll just continue on that vein because I think culture matters, and I think the reasons why people and the sincerity of what people do matter, because so often in the social media world, which we're engaged in as we speak, it's very easy to market in an insincere way and get away with it. But I think in what they're doing in International Startup Foundation, it's so obviously from the ground up, it's very sincere, and I think it's got a very strong message. And from Chaudhry's perspective, and I think probably from my perspective, and Seshadri, to be fair, we've all been in different businesses. We didn't build our career in necessarily startups. And what from somebody, I'm 61, we have the experience of good and bad things, failures, inspirations, families, and all that stuff. But very often people my age have no real clue about technology. So bridging the gap between wisdom, if you might call it that, and experience, and technology and ambition of the young is a wonderful skill, is a wonderful position to be in if you've taken an interest in technology, which we have.
Yes, absolutely. So on to startups and businesses. So was your first venture onto a startup disrupting a space that was not yet there? Or was it on a business? Was it scaling something that was existing and reaching onto master audiences?
Well, it's very interesting because there's been the way people discuss startups today, it's a fashionable word. We're moving into a very different world where people want to work in what I call the microeconomy, if you will. They want to work for themselves. They don't want to work for big organizations. I think there are many reasons for that. We're seeing big organizations get bigger.
Yes.
We're seeing people finding the ladder of growth very often closed to them. They're not necessarily able to use their inspirational ideas. They're not necessarily able to use their inspirational ideas. And they find there's blocks, and there's reasons why they think, well, I'd rather be working perhaps with people who inspired as I am for particular projects.
All right.
So, but in my career, I've always thought that I wanted to be successful in what I'm doing. So you want to make a difference. You want to be good at what you do. And my background was to work in banking, fintech.
Okay.
And I found as I went through that ladder that you can be successful in trading, taking risk, and I was using all sorts of technology skills, and we can talk about that in a moment. But in reality, even though I was in a big organization, I was running in quite a small unit of people. But I felt that there was limitations in what we could do, and and you were very much stuck, if you will, in a particular
Are these
skill set.
technical limitations or like organizational limitations in terms of the team you have?
Well, so to talk about my background, to put it into context, I worked for government bond trading. So I left university. I did economics at Leeds.
You're a dropout.
No, I got my degree. I wasn't. In those days, if you got a 2-2,
Okay.
it was called a Desmond 2-2 for some. That was a nickname.
What do you mean by 2-2?
It's obviously the excellent students get a first.
Okay.
I would call the smart and the guys that do an awful lot of work,
Okay.
they get a 2-1.
Okay.
And then just below that, we get what we call the sportsman's degree, the guy that had fun. We call those 2-2s. There is a lower level, but 2-2 was good enough for me. And that was in economics. I was very happy to do that subject. Yeah. So I took that subject, and this is 1986. So we're going back a long way. And it was a time of Big Bang. And I wasn't interested in necessarily going into the city because at the time I was quite interested in logistics, supply chains, industry, really. I was quite inspired by industry. But, it's always a competitive place. And you young guys will know that you can't always have the job you want. The job openings aren't there just because you're enthusiastic about it.
Yes.
So I did get some way in getting an opportunity in that area with a university degree, but I fell at the last hurdle. But because the City of London was opening up to American companies or international companies that wanted to set up a bank and trade, financial products.
This is pre-European Union era, right? Before before the Brit exit.
Oh, I'm going before all that. Sorry. I mean,
Okay.
this is probably very dull material for you, so I'll try and move across.
Okay.
But effectively, they opened up the licenses to trade in the UK, and this is before. This is when Microsoft was becoming quite big. So we're moving from pencil and paper to Excel spreadsheets. This is really the time when I joined the city.
All right.
So and the opportunities were there because the licenses were growing. So there were many more opportunities in the city then. So that's really why I was lucky enough to get into to a job of that type.
All right. Very interesting. So what are the exact limitations you're referring to? I mean, was it with scaling the current businesses you have? Or was it into establishing and bringing those technological ideas you have into practical applications?
Well, first of all, I was trading government bonds, and this is it's quite a niche market. Obviously, governments have to borrow lots of money, and when they borrow lots of money, they issue lots of pieces of paper.
Yes.
And then we, as a bank, were able to trade those pieces of paper. To do that effectively and understand the risk, we were using trading systems such as Bloomberg.
Okay.
Bloomberg was the first software that I was aware of where all the participants in the marketplace could contribute their version of the truth, the price the assets where they thought the assets should be priced, and put that into the platform anonymously.
Okay.
And then for the average or the mean of however you wanted to run the algorithm, would deliver the result to all the market participants. So in effect, it was the start of a consensus pricing model. Now, what was the fundamental, that made a massive difference to the price in which assets were having, the margins they were charging for risk assets. It meant that you could access the market much more cheaply. And it also meant that the volumes went up extraordinarily. And it meant that you could trade different asset classes, which provided opportunity for other countries and all sorts of people to participate in the financial services. It made it more accessible. Now, I haven't asked your question, but I've given you some sort of context. I was a big user and a believer of Bloomberg right from the early days.
Believer of what? Sorry?
From the early days of my career.
Okay.
And I think my only frustration really was the narrowness of the type of job I had. I was reasonably successful. I was able to achieve a lot of the things I wanted to achieve, but I wasn't, I was 18, 20 years doing that type of job.
That's quite young.
Well, it's also time to move on at some stage. I know it's very often people don't want to take the risk to move jobs. And so this is what I mean by, the startup mentality is for people like myself who want to take on other challenges. And sometimes that requires taking some risk, investing in yourself,
Yes.
partnering with different people, and perhaps taking different opportunities, seeing the world differently. This is how people like me think. It doesn't always work out, I can promise you that. So when I took the risk, I was persuaded to go and join a satellite risk, if you will, insurance company. So we were basically based down in Farnborough. which is where
What has insurance got to do with satellites?
well, see, satellites at the time, I knew nothing about satellites. Why would I know anything about satellites? You can't know about everything, and nor do I try and know it, especially when I was younger. I was very focused on the particular niche part of my career, what I was trying to do and be successful, which was financial markets and trading systems. And the rest of my time, I would be doing what everyone else does, which is play sport, go out, have fun, and family life.
Okay.
But when somebody came to me and said, "Oh, we want to build a Bloomberg for satellites," what does that really mean? It means we want to capture the data points
Okay.
of satellites in orbit, i.e., already launched.
Okay.
They're operating like, in my word, like cars in the sky. As
Yeah,
it
space
were.
debris is getting real.
Yeah. They're all moving about, and they're owned by some big satellite company, whether it's India Sat or Eutelsat or Inmarsat. These are the quality ones, as it were. And they were all having, do the headlights work? Do the batteries work? Have they got a substitute? Are the transponders? I can even remember the words. How efficient are they? These are all things which reflect the productivity and the life longevity of a particular craft, satellite.
Okay.
And what they realized was, because the early satellites were basically built by the MOD, Ministry of Defense.
All right.
So the first and most foremost thing is they're reliable. Nobody cares about their commercial capabilities. They care about whether the information they're there working when the military needs them in important decision making. So that was a very good platform for building very, very fine craft. But what they were finding was, as more commercial payloads, so more risks were being taken, and as a result, they became more and more of an insurance risk.
Okay.
So using military intelligence.
What do you mean by insurance risk here?
Well, insurance risk. Sorry if I'm jumping ahead like that, because sometimes, insurance risk is effectively, there's a lot of financial risk at stake. A satellite at those times, it might cost about 400 million. This is going back 20 years. It might cost 400 million pounds to build and launch a satellite. I believe that's come down to about maybe 25 million now.
Yes.
It could be lower. I haven't kept up with the market. But effectively, when you've got that amount of asset up in the sky at stake, delivering with a lifespan and commercial value, if it fails, it's a significant risk to the stakeholders.
Yes.
So of course they take out insurance. So the risk is passed on to the people who underwrite that insurance.
Okay.
So they've got to know what the risks are, so they do the evaluation.
Okay.
And they were being very lazy about it. This is my point. They were saying, look, how many satellites are there in the world? Oh, let's pretend there are 10.
Okay.
And let's say that 4 of them tend to fail more often than the others. And 6 are reasonable and 2 are excellent, whatever the maths. And they just insure them all at the flat rate. And if something fails, all the premiums pay, and then they average it out over time. That was a typical insurance model based in London. And what we set out to achieve in that project was to identify the better risks and charge them a lower premium.
Okay.
So they could basically be rewarded for their optimal design and optimized performance. And we actually were successful. We won the first contract for self-insuring satellites for Inmarsat. And the company did very well, and it still flourishes today.
All right.
So that was my first foray, if you will, into startup territory. But I left that role because it was a bumpy ride. And I left that role, and I got back more involved in building a trading platform. And this really, when trading platforms, just to talk about it very briefly, the thing about trading platforms is they're open to abuse because it's a marketplace. There might be a very niche trading platform, and this was a niche trading platform. It was government bonds, in fact, inflation government bonds, which basically bonds which protect you against inflation. And they're not terribly liquid, which means it's not obvious to everyone what the price is. The visibility, etc., is not there. But the risk is quite high if you own them or you don't own them, depending on what your requirements are.
Yes.
So when you're trying to offload, so say basically if you receive the risk or somebody's trying to transfer the risk from A to B, and you take on that risk as an intermediary, you're looking to find your exit for the risk inside the margin that you've charged for taking that risk.
Yes.
If somebody knows that you're carrying that risk, they can move the market or pass that information on to other people.
Exploit it for your own advantage and make profits.
Exactly. So you understand how that works.
Yes.
Well, because that happens rather more than you think it does, and I had a lot of experience.
All right.
Because people who are clever.
Are these crypto markets you're talking about, or the stock exchange?
Well, effectively, I was just particular to one asset, and I was in a particularly difficult asset.
Okay.
And where the difficult assets with the highest risk tend to be where there's most to gain from abusing the system.
All right.
But there's no doubt in other asset classes, whether it's derivatives or oil, I can't speak for lots of other assets, but there'll be similar type of behavior, very often by people who use their lack of skills by passing on information and getting favors from customers in order to survive in society effectively.
Yeah.
But that's a nuisance because it means the person who is taking the risk has to charge a bigger price in order to to protect themselves against abuse. Well, where does that problem end up? It ends up with the person, the pension holder.
Yes.
Which is, in more mature years, will be you. But effectively, assets are being invested, if you're a part of a pension fund, into these type of assets are being invested on your behalf into these type of assets. And when those assets become more expensive or to trade or to participate in because somebody's abusing the system, ultimately it's you that pays the price. So it's a tax on society. So what's the alternative? And of course, this is where we're getting to computers. Computers have this wonderful way, if they're programmed and coded properly, to reflect how, if you will, the consensus, the group of market participants all agree what the rules should be. And if you code the computers correctly, they can follow those rules, and you can tailor the rules with consensus, but they can follow those rules and apply those rules and make sure there's no discrimination and no one's advantaged. The payoff is that the brokers, as it were, the intermediaries, will have to seek alternative employment. But the benefit is that the computers don't cheat, largely, if they're coded properly.
If they're not hacked.
If they're not hacked, but we can talk about cryptography in a minute. But effectively, if they're properly coded and use the right security mechanisms, and the governance of the computer systems, which we can talk about again, is not in one person's hands. If you have one administrator of the computer society, if you will, if we can assume that there's a number of computers acting for the various stakeholders in the trading environment.
Yes.
If you've got one administrator for that, clearly they can change the rules and play with the system. And also they can access the information and pass it round. So they can be the new abuser of the marketplace. And we would argue, getting on to what we do, really what we're doing now, we would argue that's a very dangerous position to be in. And we'd also argue that that is a position we're seeing on the internet today, if you will, in some of the very big corporations and big messaging apps and various other technologies are still run by super administrators, but the consequences and the amount of data they've got is enormously greater than it was 10 years ago in the type of environments I'm talking about. So if computers are going to be used, they also need the governance, not to have one super administrator, but to have all the computers providing that, what we call governance. So it's a distributed governance, if you will, and you have to reach a consensus if you want to change the rules. And really that's the starting point of distributed ledger technologies.
Yes.
It's a starting point of Web3 and improving on the status quo. And that's really bringing us to where we as a business at Katlas Technologies, that's our expertise.
Yes. So we have seen the first version of Web3 in the form of NFTs and coming up into the market, which has taken a downfall in the last 2 years. NFT just came up like a hype, and people use this as a way to launder money, convert the black currency through cryptocurrencies into the white, and use and trade them into dollars, rupees, and whatever the respective currency is. So that's how it has been used, and for that hype, and for people have not understood the importance of Web3. People have not understood the consequences of the centralized power of what they can do with that governance, and slowly it has just faded into the darkness of people not building anything into the Web3. So what do you think about that? What do you think is currently wrong? And obviously the government, the current government, the central powers including big companies do not want do not want blockchain, do not want cryptocurrency, Web3 to be taking over?
That's excellent. That's a tremendous question.
Yes.
I think you've summed up exactly the fear and confusion, and also the various aspirations that surround such what could be, a massive paradigm shift. There's some wonderful benefits, but there are some great fears, and there are also some very significant losers or potential losers.
Yes.
And also, we're talking about an environment that's not particularly well understood. And when I say understood, it's not understood in its whole, and I'm not even going to pretend I understand it in its whole. And the other thing, of course, it can be compromised. And when I say compromised, when you've got a situation where stakeholders who like everything the way it is, and they see threatened from other people who can perhaps undermine them in terms of cost, productivity, democracy, etc., what they tend to do is meet you at the halfway house. They give you something of what you want,
Yes.
but not the answer you seek. So we have a journey to go on, and we're seeing that I think I've been quite surprised how slow the uptake was. And why have I been surprised? Because, well, one, perhaps I'm naive, but two, I came from a background of quite simplicity. The financial markets, digital trading is very straightforward. If you do it a bit better, you get paid better. You reduce the margins, you outcompete your competitors. You can put that into place in a very short period of time using tools like Excel and other trading tools. But when we get into the world of outside financial markets, and I do want to touch on the difference between the fintech world of cryptography or cryptocurrencies,
Okay.
and the areas which we particularly specialize in, which is the advances that these distributed ledger technologies and distributed governance can bring to other areas in industry, which is where the individual is the center of their own universe. And this is what I mean by a self-sovereign digital twin, where you keep your own data in your locker. That allows you has benefits in the health sector, because you can provide that data, reuse that data, single source of data, to multiple research companies that are participating in e-commerce, participating in clinical trials, and all sorts of other areas. But you're able to share that information with privacy and with consent, and you're also capable of being rewarded, charging a fee for it, which means you become a participant and owner of your own data. And also you can run the AI locally. You can bring the AI to your data instead of you sending the data to somebody else and having a version stored of your data everywhere else but with you. But that's just health. But then how about your profile for hospitality? How do you retain your sports performance metrics? How do you share those? The whole economy of yourself is massively, the benefits you can only imagine. And actually one of the things where I've always thought the key to this type of technology is actually for communities to reach consensus on ideas, political concepts, understanding what people really think in various environments.
Yes.
So that you can get a consensus in, let's say, because if you understand, if you don't mind me talking a bit about politics, I think we've all got a certain amount of
That
politics
plays an
in us.
important role. I was absolutely hoping you to go on that.
Yes, I'm certainly not going to get into party politics because I don't think it's very interesting at all. But I do think what is interesting is the tools available that might change the way we participate in politics. And I do think decentralized tools and personalizing of your data will allow you to participate in questionnaires almost in a situation where you're in a continuous referendum, if you will, or a continuous evaluation of consensus amongst your peers.
Yes.
As environments change. And one of the big challenges and this does speak to the International Startup Foundation to some extent, how do they deliver technology to the rural areas? And why would there need to be different, let's say, localized solutions in the provincial areas where there's perhaps less money, where there's perhaps less resources available, perhaps there's less training and all these other things. And this is often reflected in the way that they think. You tend to find there's a big difference. People in rural areas tend to think more, they tend to be more self-reliant. They tend to not rely on help because possibly if they did rely on it, it wouldn't arrive. So they tend to be more, I think, very much more resourceful, very often. And people who live in built-up areas tend to get used to public services, because you may need more public services to manage large number of people in urban areas, but you end up with a different mindset.
Yes.
And now, where am I going with this? Is because I think you need different solutions in different localities. And I think with the Web 2 world, we've come to a very centralized environment where people believe perhaps what we're being led to believe through big organizations and big governments, agreeing on what they think is the right approach, and possibly coming up with ideas about what technologies they should give young people, and perhaps coming up with ideas or ways of convincing people that they've got better ideas or they know better how to make sure your future and your family's future. Trust me. And I think what decentralized technologies offer is the technology which empowers you as not only as an interested participation in society, but also an interested participation in a microeconomy. You're suddenly able to open up conversations with partners, forming groups,
Yes.
solving problems. Project teams can open and close. And I'm going to give you, if you don't mind, a little example of how I came to understand this. And it's because I have to speak about my technology partner, because of course I wouldn't be doing this if I hadn't met Marcos Mayorga. But his background is physics. He's a master of physics. He went to university in Madrid, and he was an aeronautics technician or developer.
Yeah.
So his as I understand it, he was solving aircraft to aircraft communication problems, and also again solving the problem of aircraft speaking to each other to agree on missile targets, for example, or any other instructions that they've been sent out on a mission to find out. And of course, they wanted to overcome the problem of getting it wrong, and they found that computers were more reliable than humans, and they wanted to take humans out of that loop, to use his jargon.
Yes.
So that was his background. So he understands how to reach a consensus using computers. But he's also got a democratic philosophy. He believes that all humans, let me put this perspective, and just to give a visualize of it, that we're all kind of atoms, if you like.
Yes.
I wouldn't want to say ants on the planet. We might look like that, but we're all atomic in some way. He likes to give power to the atomic level. And I know this is jargon they use in for those who've read a lot about Bitcoin and the vision of the originators. But really, by giving people atomic power, as it were, or the tools they need to operate as an atom, if you will, you then provide, I need to close this one down, but you then provide the right environments for them to thrive.
Yes.
And that means stay away from the cold places and move to where the warm places is. Form molecules where it's convenient to form molecules. And then as they move cold, they break away from molecule and they move back and form different. And basically my idea is, I see this as how humans need to be at the lowest possible level. They need to be forming convenient bonds, and they need to find a warm place to thrive.
Yes.
And if I had to say one thing, if we are able to communicate that from a granular level up, I would like to see the governance of nations, the political powers, could then create the environments where this environment has microeconomy, if you will, is a warm place.
Yes.
That people can not only participate really effectively, but also take ownership, so that they can benefit from such a paradigm.
That's wonderfully put, and I had a great hang of the explanation you just gave me. But going back to compliance and reality, I have this doubt. There are centralized powers, there are big organizations, and in some cases unnamed factors that are taking down these initiatives, becoming roadblocks on the path of great leaders, great entrepreneurs like yourself building in the Web3 space. We had the Telegram CEO who got arrested by France, and they deemed that whatever the messaging, whatever the privacy, their data systems to be shared with the governance. And then we had WazirX taken down by hackers and closing down. And similarly, Brave, which is a Web3 browser, being accused of a lot of international policies violation by the court. So when these things are happening by unnamed factors or centralized government bodies, how are entrepreneurs, or how is the community, or however the enterprise is supposed to react to it, and what is the right thing, do you think, is according to you?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think getting back to your earlier point about NFTs, and I think there was a certain lack of sincerity about why NFTs went up and went down. I think there was a massive lack of sincerity in terms of the investors of the early crypto coins, that they were being ramped up by effectively rather a small number of very rich individuals. And then they were being sold and moving on to the next project. So nobody really had a lot of confidence in the motivation for creating these new economies,
Okay.
broadly speaking. And then we get to the first thing is that the authorities are going to see that type of behavior. And the elites and the governments and various corporations are going to see that type of behavior and go, these people aren't trying to benefit society. These people are just running get-rich schemes. And they're just sort of, they're not really, they don't share our ideals. Now, the moment you put yourself at odds with the authorities in that way, and it's convenient to do so, you're going to find it very difficult to win trust.
Yes.
And hold hands and build for. So I think we've needed to go through this cold, what you might call frozen period, I suppose you might call it,
Okay.
where the whole industry of Web3, not so much Web3, because Web3 is still, in my view, still considered to be very much the top end, the applications, the meta, if you will. That it's a content-driven what you see when you go on the internet. From our perspective, it's much more about who owns the data, whether you've got privacy, whether you've got consent, and whether you can create your own IP and protect your IP and make that IP available to somebody else.
Yes.
Which supports the microeconomic model of the individual. But to get to your point, how do we persuade government and large stakeholders to come on board? Well, I think there is a way. I really do. And first of all, yes, let's have the back-end technology designed in such a way so it's configurable.
Okay.
There's number one. So that we can put in the trust anchors, which we need, which means who's on the internet. And then we can put in things like licensing for private networks. So who can join the networks, who can't, whether they've got a license, etc. That to some extent, there will be licensing of networks. But then who's allowed in? And that'll be a conversation for politicians. But first of all, you've got to take a step in, and you may not like it as a human rights guy. You may not like it if you're a crypto anarchist that wants. Well, when I say this, I mean somebody who wants ultra freedom. You might not like the decentralized system to have governance of that fashion.
All right.
But people need to understand how it can deliver value before they take their foot off the brakes. And I guess there is some sort of balance between regulating it tightly and then taking the foot off the regulator a little bit and actually trusting the community to self-manage itself. And it wasn't so long ago that politicians felt that self-regulation was actually quite a positive thing.
Yes.
And that communities would be able to find a consensus on finding the right balance. I think in the last 20 years, or at least 10, it's become very fashionable to come up with regulations and come up with rules because everybody wants to build the world in their own image. Well, we don't believe that the world can be built in every individual's image. Sooner or later, you've got to come sort of to uniformity. But I prefer that uniformity to come from a consensus algorithm than from the higher ups who've managed to, they're in a privileged situation or potentially in a situation where they benefit from or have an agenda for the rules they impose. So my vision is actually that we can work with, and this is not a conversation I've had, so I'm going to be very careful here.
Okay.
But imaginative, should we say, initiatives and projects such as the International Startup Festival have and NGOs of similar nature, with the right governance and with the right relationships and with the right sense of fair play, cultural governance, if you will, model, I think could be the leaders, actually. They could set an example of how Web3 type technologies could be implemented in a safe way for the benefit. So I do have a vision for how this type of technology is going to be used. But we're early stages because I still see, speaking last week to a lot of the young guys at the engineering colleges and various other colleges that turned up to the Startup Festival, they were very much still built their ideas, good ones, but not always original. It's not like I haven't heard some of them before.
Okay.
I was very supportive that they were good ideas nonetheless. But my worry always is that their idea won't scale, that they'll find that the community app for sports or asset management isn't going to, you're not going to be able to blend it with somebody who's done something with the university down the road.
Yes.
But what you do have with it seems to me in India, you've got the people who are technology minded and entrepreneurial from the age of 8 or even 11. And by the time they get to 16, they're almost masters of their trade. But I see what I'd like to see, as opposed to what will happen. I'd like to see these incubators using open source technologies, distributed ledger technologies, in order to actually which is effectively collaborative software. I'd like to see them starting to play with this software, starting to build communities. And I know this isn't the first time it's been done, but I think they need to start building them in genuinely self-sovereign digital twin networks where you're manager of your own data.
Yes.
And not managing private data on a public blockchain.
Trust networks than people.
Hey?
Trust networks than people. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's sorry, I'm not a technologist. I hope so. I will get lost occasionally in the data science of it. But I think the closer you get to how you'd like, technology is our servant. That's how it should be.
Yes.
And what we should be doing with technology is, where we can, is to design technology that can represent our personal interests. And it's not for me to give you technology that represents your personal interests. Sorry, it's not for me to tell you what technology that should be.
Yes.
It's for you for me as a technologist to give you the technology that's going to work for you.
Yes.
And that's not just, so we have to have an underpinning technology, which I think we call back-end technology, or web operating systems, if you like, is my understanding. And then you have all this other capabilities like the AIs and all this other clever stuff, how you tune in to all the other clever technologies that people have built. So you access those, hopefully at convenient prices, so that you get the tools you need and the capabilities in your hands to help you. And I am going to use a bit of jargon. I see the world where AI is going to drive an awful lot of the decisions which are made, whether it's IoT, whether it's human, however you imagine it. So you as an individual must have AI working for you too. So you need your warrior, your defender of your interests when you face the internet, so that you can bargain to serve your interests, not give information to somebody else so that you have to pay double the price.
Yes.
Or that you end up in a queue and that they know more about you than you know about yourself. No, my AI knows all about me and helps me get the best bargains and serves my best interest. And I think we deserve those tools, and I think it's up to technologists to provide them.
So do you think at what stage we are at right now in terms of that, having personalized AI that is secure and that is only accessible to me? How are we sure of that information? I mean, most of the consumers will not. They're like, okay, I have an AI agent. It's getting me from point A to point B.
I think it's a good point.
Yeah.
What I think you're asking me, how is this going to get adopted? And what is the consumer missing today that he's actually going to realize?
More like the
or
enterprises, and the companies are building this. They're at what stage and what do they benefit?
Well, partly due to the crypto freeze, or whatever you might have called that period. The sort of the period of a bit of rejection, the period of actually reevaluating and saying, let's build something that people want instead of just a crypto coin or a fashionable NFT. All very worthy. Once we've got over that, we've also got a lot of what we call, I don't want to call them exactly, but the Web 2 platform is being improved all the time. I mean, you've got lots of payment apps, you've got lots of very credible capabilities, which are improving the consumer experience. We can get food delivered in 10 minutes. We can get all sorts of, useful things. But actually the really big projects, which the International Startup Foundation are looking to challenge, is how do we deliver scalable technology for research in hospitals? How do we deliver AI at scale so that solving health problems, the price of it is much lower than it currently is today? And one of the biggest challenges you have with implementing artificial intelligence and machine learning and all these other clever technologies which are beyond my capability is they're pulling data from multiple sources and they're training data from multiple sources. But what people are not aware of, and it only doesn't matter in a lot of areas, but it does matter in health. You've got to know when you make a decision that the data you're evaluating is high quality. And also there is something else actually, even if they might be, and bear in mind, even if they might be very close to being 100% accurate, which is good enough to make perhaps a diagnosis, there are some human rights which we need to respect. And some of the laws, this is a challenge across the world with data. So privacy needs to be protected. You have to provide consent to share your data. Now, governments and perhaps some of the artificial data scientists, etc., can see some great benefits, but they don't want to they want to be able to get data without getting consent.
Okay.
They don't mind privacy.
Yes.
Well, you can understand why that might be a conflict of interest here, because they spend a lot of money building these models. They're very keen for their technology to advance science and deliver health benefits. And this is you can see why this is a political consideration. Do we drop the privacy rules? Do we get rid of the consent? Well, I think necessity is a mother of invention, they say. So the moment you say, well, we don't need to worry about the privacy rules and we don't need to worry about the consent rules, is the moment we give up investing any time into solving that challenge. So I think there's a trade-off here. But I'd like to see, we're already in a position where I think in the health area, we're in a position now where we can start to meet the challenges of privacy and consent by delivering the self-sovereign digital twin management system. And if it's in our hands, it deserves to be tested, it deserves to be tried. And if it is tested and tried and proved it meets the requirements, legal requirements, it meets societal requirements, and it delivers safer, more secure, and what they call responsible and ethical artificial intelligence applications, then that's exactly where we should be. And I think India's got an opportunity to deliver that and lead the world in how to deliver health in an ethical way using these artificial intelligence predictive tools.
So that's a valid point out right there. But my question is, why India? And what is the cost of getting this? Cost of all this technological advances the next generation is going to have?
Well, the amount of money that's been spent on, should we say, blockchain 1.0, which is putting private data in a public blockchain, is probably been very expensive. A lot of people have put an awful lot of money into trying to prove that's a good way of doing it. We profoundly don't think that is a good way of doing it. We think putting private information in a public blockchain is a very bad idea, particularly health data.
Yes.
And not only because private data shouldn't sit in a public blockchain and doesn't need to sit in a public blockchain, and it should be self-sovereign with you, but also it's going to be vulnerable to advances in quantum computing, for example, which may, when they do hack the blockchain secured centralized platform, they're going to get all the data. So there's still a nice little honeypot there for the clever guys to go for. If you need an incentive to make quantum computing advance, let's put loads of private data in a blockchain. Yeah. So we don't like that model. What we see, but if there's public data in a public blockchain, well, bring it on, because it's public data. That's where it should be. Exactly. But private data should be sitting with you, self-sovereign with you. Or, it's not a bad thing if somebody wants to provide a custodial network to support your data if they choose. But the safest place is under your privacy control.
What do you think about monetizing this data? What if someone chooses to consent to sell their data at a cost of a price?
Well, they're already doing that, aren't they? Because they're offering vouchers for you to participate in clinical trials. They're offering all sorts of rewards for doing all sorts of things. And of course, there's a massive, the market there's a huge market in your data. So, a data lake for me is data oil. It's in so much as it's potentially an opportunity for the owners of the guardians of the lake to use that data for their advantage.
Okay.
So it seems nonsense to me that the source of the data, the IP of that data, if there's value in it, I think that the value should be shared with the owner of that data, but not just with potential fiat currency or coins or tokens or discounts, whatever they may be, a reward. And you need a decent reward system. And if you're using reward systems, they need to be on a trustless, secured environment, private blockchain, if you will. But there is another thing besides, when it comes to sharing data. And I, if you don't mind, I'm just going to.
Before we move on, I have one doubt. So what if I choose to sell the data with, the ID being mismatched? For example, you have like 10 people and all of them have their private data, and we just swap their ID. We don't attach any personal information and use that data to train models. Does it work?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, you're asking me that was quite. So you're saying, are you selling somebody else's data, or are you just selling your own data?
You just remove the personal. I don't know. I have data, a bunch of data, but I don't know it's your data.
Yeah, exactly. But you see, there's two things. First of all, if you're going to be running, so if we build a big data lake or a big repository for India health data or state data or wherever data it might be, it doesn't have to be health. It could be in something else. It could be in banking, etc. Today, there are very big projects where government is incentivized or is incentivizing technologies to come up with what they call privacy enhancing technology, PET. Now, PETs, I thought, that's wonderful. We're a privacy enhancing technology. We absolutely believe in providing the tools and capabilities for sharing information with privacy and consent.
Yes.
But what I found was actually PETs were just a way of accessing large amounts of other people's data, but in a way that would retain their anonymity.
Okay.
Well, okay, so you solved the privacy, but you haven't solved the consent. And my problem with that is that for research, there will be lots of benefits. And for government and big corporations, there'll be lots of benefits because they will learn an awful lot about you and about society, and they'll be able to use that technology to make, you might ask, better decisions. They can also be in a situation where they could make, for you, worse decisions. They can draw a lot of conclusions which may or may not be right. I'm not a data scientist, but either way, it's an awful lot of power going up. And there's no asymmetry to that. There's no power coming down.
Yes.
I don't have AI that runs on that same data that delivers me the results of that intelligence. So when they're running data in that privacy enhanced way, why am I not getting the outcomes? Why am I not sharing those outcomes?
Yes.
And to me, that's where the consent comes in. If you want my data, I don't care if it's anonymized and it's, if you will, analyzed safely. I do care that you're taking my data, but not allowing me to get the benefits of the research.
Okay, got it. You put a price on it for me.
Exactly. Okay. So, and also, I think you'll get better data and more data if you actually treat the human being with respect, bring them in to the game, and allow them to contribute to the data lake willingly.
Yeah. So give it in both ways.
Give it, exactly. Yeah. And then if you contribute with consent and with privacy, you can then also benefit from what you learn. So now if you do that, you've then got accountability, you've got transparency.
Yes.
And so, everyone can see what the results are. Whereas government, typically, government doesn't like paying bills, and rather like research, or all of us, we don't like information that doesn't suit us. So what do we typically do? We bury the research that doesn't deliver the value that what we didn't want to do, and we big up on the things which we do want to do.
Okay,
it's just natural. So of course, if the people who are contributing the data can't see what's happening, then how do we monitor and make sure it's done properly? So I think bringing humans into the game is democratic, and I think it's better for human rights, and I actually think it's more respectful, and I think it will deliver give more better data for better outcomes.
All right. So Edward, we can always go on this conversation for hours.
We could go on for a long time.
As long as the battery runs out.
The danger is you bore everyone to death.
Yeah.
I hope we can just concentrate on the really important things which people want to talk about.
Yes.
And understand where the value is, and get people to perhaps talk about those and find out where we agree and where we can maybe work together on taking the technology further.
Okay. So what I wanted to know more, since this topic is going to be never ending, as an emerging entrepreneur, I would like to know critical points in your life where, you felt like you were at the bottom of the ocean but then you realize it was for something, it was meant to be, and it got you on a new path, built you on a new venture and something new. So I would like to know, like, what have you faced as an engineer, as an entrepreneur, as a person in different organizational capabilities that emerging or aspiring entrepreneurs are
Well,
supposed to.
I'm quite self-reliant, and I come from a provincial area that I may have picked up on that earlier. So when I was young, which was in the 70s, it was a time where in farming, when my father was involved in chicken farming, a startup business.
Okay.
It was quite tough. There wasn't a lot of money. We were probably better off than many people in the area. So, I don't like to claim that I was, the worst off by any stretch.
Okay.
But it was a lot different, in terms of you didn't have what and also you start to see what it is for people to strive to succeed, and when they fail. And so, of course, my father ultimately didn't succeed in building his chicken hatchery or farming business successfully. He had to close it, and he didn't live a long life. And I think it brought him lots of struggles.
Okay.
And when you see that type of thing, you want to repair the damage. So it's something in your soul that you say, ultimately, I want to do what he wants to do. Sorry, I don't talk about it very often. But I wanted to show that we were capable of building a business in his image. That was it. So I always have that passion to be, as a family, self-sufficient and not reliant on a big corporation, and not be a salaryman, and not be someone who has to do what the organization says and has to think like the organization and lose your sense of human purpose. I think that's what a big corporation can do to you. And it's also what big government can do to you. So I don't like to see too much power in big corporations, too much power in governments. And I believe very much in the benefits. I think we need to empower people, young entrepreneurs who want to be autonomous, that want to be, whether they're male or female, let's not move there. But basically, they both want to contribute to developing their family and also be imaginative, come up with ideas, build new products, and be good startups. I think that's a really powerful model for society.
That's strong inspiration right there.
Thank you.
Extremely strong inspiration. But over the path of exiting one company, you always are in a dilemma of financial struggle. Everyone has a family to feed themselves, and money propels the world and our ventures and our ideas.
Well, yeah.
So how was the transition for you, and what did you go through during the transition phase?
Well, I mean, in terms of being able to survive as a startup, you mean? Well, I'm probably not the ideal example, but I was aware that obviously there's two times I think you can be a startup and take the risk in an efficacious way. One is before.
In what way?
Efficacious is
Efficacious, okay.
yeah. Well, I think efficacious means better than efficient, if you will.
Okay. Yeah.
Is the best way possible, I think.
Okay.
Is and I heard this last week, so I will go along with the idea of joining a big company to start with, just to get some feel for what the real world looks like. I can see some value in that, although I'm neither here nor there, because I think some people just are born to be entrepreneurs and organized or whatever, self-serving, if that's the right word, self-driven. But I think there's two times you can do it before you marry, unless your wife is particularly entrepreneurial as well, or girlfriend, or however you arrange yourself. I think before you take on significant responsibilities.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's a very dangerous thing to be taking on serious risks when you have responsibilities like a family. It's not just you have dependencies. So let's be smart about that.
Yes.
So you have a wonderful opportunity when you're young and inspired, but once and then you have another opportunity later in life, if you've kept yourself fit and healthy, when your children are able to stand on their own 2 feet, hopefully, and fly the nest, to use the jargon, and they're no longer a responsibility. So, and then you get this great opportunity to use your knowledge and perhaps invest your time in running your startup, and really that's what I've been doing. But in my particular case, I've backed the technology as a partnership. It's a bit like, I see myself as sort of sponsoring Mozart, if you like. We're yet to see if Mozart will be quite, our technology will be quite of that standard, if you will. But ultimately, that's the relationship between me and my co-partner. And then I work with other, to inspire other people to use this type of technology to advance it from there. I don't know whether that answers the question
It does.
entirely.
It does. In a way, it does. In a different forms than I actually imagined it to be.
You're welcome to ask it again. But if you're talking about how do we get our money back, yeah. Well, if we are very serious in terms of I think there's many ways, because we're building an ecosystem, we're building a digital marketplace, and it covers a horizontal across many verticals, and we're able to license our technology in so many different ways. We can either provide we're obviously providing a SaaS model, which basically B2B companies can use to deliver service to C.
Okay.
So we have a wonderful model for that. They can buy the technology outright as a private license. They've got access to the base technology as an open source to build a sort of, the sort of blockchain, Linux blockchain type approach, if you will.
Right.
And then you've got a straightforward, every time we build the protocols, which are basically the capabilities to automate processes across the digital marketplace or Web3. There's all sorts of clever tools which enable the nodes to communicate effectively in a trustless fashion, which can all become a library of capabilities that all have a small fee for growing out the network, as it were. So I think, I think we can exit in many ways. I think through industry partnerships. I think we can provide licenses in healthcare, or we could. I suppose we could never really sell the business outright. We could, if you see what I mean. IBM bought Red Hats, for example.
Yes.
Sounds very grand. But at a lower level, yes, we could do that. And yes, that would probably be optimal if we can take the business to that level. But it's going to be a community of people that do that. It's going to be a library of developers building a library of capabilities, which everyone starts to realize serves everyone. And I think that's. But prior to that, we could. I think industry partnerships with. With perhaps an industry sale would be convenient for us, and convenient. But we're not necessarily sure, because we're already building relationships with industry. We're kind of exiting with industry partners as we go along, if that makes any sense.
It does. Although, I mean, there was one question I would like to ask you. I'm not sure if this kind of ideology, this kind of thought process happens in the UK and the teens in Europe. But in India, what happens is when you're an 18-year-old, when you're 20-year-old, and you're going through education and everything, you take the path, the entrepreneur path, on deciding there's a problem, there is a social thing that people are facing through. There's something I have faced, and you decide to build something. When you even try to even choose that path and expose your thoughts with your environment, such as your family, your friends, there is a very very strong obstruction that you're not going to apply for, you're not going to prepare for a competitive exam, you're not going to prepare for a CAT or a SAT, or be an employer, or prepare for Google, or prepare for Microsoft.
So sorry, you're going to get blocked by your family and friends?
Yes.
From an 18-year-old perspective?
Yeah, from an 18-year-old perspective.
Well, I mean, I'm going to be conservative. I'm a parent myself.
Okay.
I think if you want to go against your parents, you have to have a very strong driving force inside you to do so. And I think the more resistance your parents put up, that'll test your driving force. And I think the only way to change that driving, that pressure against you, is to do all the hard work, all the diligence, and invest further to prove them wrong. But I would find it very difficult because of I think it's very easy to be optimistic. I think it's very easy to be passionate and inspired, but it's not very easy to be guarantee your own success. We can all be somewhat arrogant when we can see what the end of the journey looks like, but we need to be somewhat humble in terms of what the journey to that end point might be.
Wise words, Edward. And Edward, before we close off, there is one last thing I would like to ask. That is, a lot of our audience are, aspiring entrepreneurs and emerging entrepreneurs themselves. So what is the one piece of advice you would like to give them where they're supposed to fight with all the elements, like the one you just talked about, and I just mentioned?
I think you have to have a philosophy of life. I think you have to remember what your cultural values are, where you came from, what your parents stand for, what your brothers and sisters stand for. and understand whatever you build has to fit to some extent with those core values. Now, that's not necessarily meaning that those cultural values can't be migrated, and you can't work with them, you can't migrate. We're always looking to improve. And yes, sometimes technologies are going to disrupt, and we need technologies to disrupt. But I think if you're going to get over hardships or over frustrations or over blocks and the various things we talked about, which very often might leave you somewhat lonely and destitute, the only thing that's going to give you comfort and give you resilience is the fact you have core values which you're looking to achieve. And I think that's what's going to bring other people to you, your help, and they will support you. And if you were right, you will, and you persevere, and you've got the skills and talents, and you know where to think you will get to your journey. So that's really my advice. Don't be thinking you're the cleverest guy in the world and that you can abandon all your bridges and all your cultural values and that you know better than everybody else. That's it. I don't have much more than that.
Wise words, Edward, and thank you for joining us and taking on time for us. Okay.
It's been a great pleasure. Thank you very much indeed.